The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
Oh, get in.
This guy's a big blocky robot cat thing. Whatever Mangog is.
Robot cat?
I don't know what Mangog is
Mangog
supposed to be.
looks ridiculous.
Maybe Mr. Mind and Robot Cat should take over the world together.
For sure, Mangog and Mr. Mind. That'd be great.
Welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast in a sea of comics. I'm Noah.
Kayla.
Jared.
Yeah. Today we have a very special birthday episode.
Oh, yeah.
We're doing this episode because Jared wanted it for his birthday.
Kayla really wanted to do this episode, so we had to do it. That's true. This is my birthday present. I was like, you don't have to get me anything. Just let us do.
Prioritizing our first very, very super gigantic deep dive.
Let us do the mighty Thor deep dive. And then... That's not really good thunder.
Was that?
I'm
Oh,
sick.
I thought that was lightning.
That's way too many sound effects.
Damn it.
Yeah, so we're doing the Thor deep dive. The mighty Thor, the Thunderer, the god of Gaia, or the son of Gaia, the lightning giver, the hammer thrower, the wish is he was the strongest Avenger, the mighty Thor.
I love that, actually. I was going to tell you to stop until you got to that second to last one.
It's just a callback to the movies.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
So good.
So we'll dive right into this one because this
Deeply.
is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
So
We can do it, though.
I am fatigued.
already. So Thor, cosmic god of Asgard. He is 6'6", 640 pounds.
What?
Just like a normal guy. Just like a normally proportioned man.
Blue eyes and blonde, luscious, flowing locks, depending on what comic you're reading.
He has short hair now. For some reason.
Yeah, so just to explain why he's so heavy is because it's part of his Asgardian elder god hybrid physiology. It's just he's half Asgardian, half elder god. His skin, muscle, and bones
Are they just denser?
yeah, several times.
Okay,
more
that makes
density.
sense. When you said 660, I was just like, I'm so confused.
Yeah, so that contributes, and they say his superhuman weight.
That's a power.
So that's a category now, guys.
It's the power to like bend diving boards.
Break them, are you kidding?
He's also invulnerable to powerful energy blasts, weighted impacts, fall from great heights, explosions, and various other opposing forces. He has this ability called the Life Force, also known as the God Force. It's a godly energy that fuels Thor's godlike powers. Unlike other deities, Thor's unique life force allows him to have full access to his powers regardless of what realm he's in. Also, it's the key to his God Blast, which I don't think he's used in a very long time.
He hasn't used it in a while. That's true.
But he has a Kamehameha ability of a God Blast.
It's true. I think it just sounds too gross, and that's why they cut
Well, does
it
it
out.
drain like his life energy if that's the equivalent?
He would take his life energy and channel it through Mjolnir.
Yeah, that seems dangerous.
Yeah, and then he would kill stuff.
But then also almost
He
die.
used it to like
because-
deflect Galactus and push the Juggernaut back, which is like a big deal because you're not supposed to be able to do that.
Yeah, so God Blast. Doesn't use it anymore. He has godlike strength. He's so strong that he lifted the Midgard serpent that is large enough to coil around the world several times.
So planetary level
Lifting.
dead lifting.
Yeah, I think he's even held together a moon. Like he's done
Oh my God.
all these amazing feats. That,
Well, he's well in like the Superman Hulk level kind of strength.
yeah.
Yeah.
He has invulnerability, duh. Superhuman speed, obviously. Healing factor, longevity. So this is an interesting one because a lot of people might think just because he's a god, he's immortal, but he's not. He just ages so slowly. I think he's like thousands of years old, but so to regular people, to us Midgardians, it would be, he seems immortal.
He's like Tolkien elves. They
Exactly.
just live a very long time.
Well, he also does this thing where the Norse gods eat apples from Idun,
Oh my God.
and it makes them live forever.
Oh my god.
I know.
which was what I was about to say.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I didn't know if you were going to get to it because, it's like an apple-related immortality, which is not a common form of immortality.
He also has self-sustenance, so he can survive in the vacuum of space without any aid, and also does not need air, food, water, or sleep.
That's terrifying.
And he could talk in space, which I think is wrong to do. Like, you're not supposed
An apple
to
a
do
day
that.
keeps death away.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
He has electrokinesis, which you've seen him use as lightning, weather control. He's able to summon huge storms, rain, lightning from the sky, and also creating weather where there normally isn't any. He also has the ability to create unnatural weather, like fire rain on a barren planet.
Hell yeah.
Oh my god.
That's one of my favorite moments.
You say something, I just immediately forget it because, oh my god.
He also has this really cool ability called the all tongue / all speak. So whenever Thor speaks in all tongue or speak, whoever hears him hears it in their language.
That's cool. That's like a monk ability in D&D.
Exactly.
And I'm pretty sure all the gods do that. So it's
Understand
like a
all
thing they do.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what, a lot of his abilities are kind of in his Asgardian heritage or god heritage.
Yeah.
But he has like those little extra ones, like the electrokinesis and stuff like that. That's particular to him. And then one of the biggest ones, Mjolnir. So it helps him fly, open dimensional portals. It comes back to him from anywhere whenever he puts his hand out and wants it to come back. And
Hell yeah.
it also helps him. It's more of a tool, also a weapon that helps him focus.
Like a hammer.
Yeah.
So it like channels.
Yeah, it helps him focus his lightning or any of his other abilities. Because he can do those without Mjolnir, but it's not as focused.
It's chaotic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's...
I feel that way too. Like I can, if I have a hammer, I can channel my personality in ways
Oh, I
that
thought
I
you
couldn't
were-
without a hammer.
Like if you're trying to nail something, it'd be much more focused.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Instead
yeah.
of trying to just hit it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he has a lot of other powers and former powers, but that just paints a big, lovely, godlike picture of this already fully stacked character.
Yeah.
I've learned so much already.
Yeah, he can do a lot of stuff. To Mjolnir, it's important to say too that he's it means the crusher, which is cool as shit in Old Norse. The crusher. What's your weapon named? Yeah, nothing. It's not. And then also it was made from Uru, and it was forged in a dying star.
Yeah.
Maybe. Because it has like different origins.
As
Like,
do most things in
I know
comics.
it's difficult. So the one main one is that Odin kind of carved it and had it sort of like commissioned by these dwarfs. Eitri, he was in the movie,
Yeah.
Infinity Watch, and
Tyrion.
then exactly, and then giant Tyrion, and then he just essentially blessed it with his cosmic level sorcery. But then more recently, Jason Aaron has changed that, or at least put it into question, where the idea is he put a giant space storm. Sort of like a thunder version
It's
of
like
the Phoenix Force.
sentient.
Yeah. It's like this primordial force that's been around since the universe. In the comics, the Phoenix was like jealous of it.
Oh my gosh.
Ooh, got all jealous. And Odin, at the dawn of history, was able to sort of put that into the hammer.
It's like, I'm just going to hide your
Yeah,
jealousy
yeah,
into this
yeah.
hammer. Because Odin was the Phoenix too,
Yeah.
which is
Oh my
also
God.
interesting.
What?
Yeah. Odin had been host
Oh my
of
God.
the Phoenix.
And we'll talk about it later, but he also had relations with the Phoenix,
What?
which itself kind of weird. But
So wouldn't that be relations with himself?
well,
in
no,
some
it's
weird
different
proxy?
time. It's different time. It's how like a boxer could be the champion, but then later isn't the champion anymore, but could have sex with the champion or what. It's
Oh
basically the
my
most common
God.
analogy. Anyway, okay.
So before we get into that, I did want to say this quote from Thor, because I think it's the most Thor-y quote of everything that I could find.
Hell yeah.
So, all the power of the storm from all the world flows through my veins and can be summoned by mine hammer at any time, wherever it is. A lightning storm in Japan? Mine. A thunder off the coast of Barbados? Mine again. A brace of tornadoes in Kansas? Mine. All that might, all that destructive force, mine to command. Channeled and guided through the mystic might of his hammer, guide right at thee.
Yeah.
That's so Thor-like.
So humble.
It's, usually he doesn't say something that long. Usually it's like, have at thee, or for Asgard, or Odds blood.
He doesn't normally monologue.
Yeah.
That's from a really early issue, so that's
Yeah.
probably why he had some exposition.
He normally just smashes stuff. Yeah.
So before, I think we should do some world setting, quite literally.
Agreed. Yeah.
So realm setting, if you will. Once we get into everything, it will be a lot easier to follow in case you don't know this about Thor. So we'll go into the 9 realms and just kind of give a little blurb about them,
Yeah.
what they are.
Well, yeah. So the 9 realms are basically this weird cosmology that it gets weird in Marvel because the idea is like they don't join all worlds in Marvel, like the Shi'ar aren't part of it or the microverse or whatever. But there are these 9, maybe 10 worlds, dimensions or whatever that get connected by this tree Yggdrasil, which in Norse mythology is this tree connects all life or
The
whatever.
tree of life.
Yeah. In this case, it connects these 10 places. So let's start with where Thor's from, right? And Odin and Asgard.
Ding.
Well, yeah, that's like it's the perfect city of the badass gods. And it's
Olympus.
home to, this is kind of a weird thing about Norse mythology. There are really 2 kinds of gods, and it's preserved in the comics too. It's home of the Aesir, right? Or Aesir or something like that. So it's Odin, Thor, and everything like that. That's where all the main gods are. And that's where the Rainbow Bridge is housed, which gets you to all the other realms. It was always just like a literal bridge, but it's become, in recent years, this weird teleportation technology, which is actually kind of cool,
Yeah.
to be honest.
But it's still all colorful and stuff.
It's
so it's
pretty
fine.
still.
Yeah.
Oh, it's never not rainbowy. Yeah. So yeah, Asgard's sort of known as like this big, beautiful rolling hills, Tolkien-esque New Zealand hobbity place. That's what it basically looks like. And there's the city of Asgard, which is a big golden city right in the middle. And that's where Thor lives. He's very humble. And okay. And so what else? What's next? We've got Vanaheim. So Vanaheim is the home of the old gods, the Vanir. But what gets confusing is some of the gods that we know are actually from the Vanir. So Freya, we'll talk about her later. Heimdall, I think, is originally one of the Vanir or whatever. And it's kind of a mysterious, broken down place. It's nothing but like old forests and like you can think of like Greek architecture, like from the like where all the stuff is just sort of broken down and everything like that.
Aw.
Yep, and basically the Vanir are just Asgardian gods. For our purposes, it's like Asgard 2. You know what I mean? It's like a second city or something like that. It's like St. Paul and Minneapolis. That's basically what we're talking about here.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great cities.
Totally. Okay. Next one, Jotunheim. Right? You guys may have heard about this because in the movie, it's where Loki sort of his birthplace or whatever. And in the movie, it's this like big wastelandy kind of frozen place. But that's only part of it. So the frost giants are there. This is the home of the giants, the mountainous home of the giants. But there's a bunch of different kinds of giants actually. So there's storm giants, and there's hill giants and mountain giants. And I assume Skittles giants. I don't know. There's all kinds
I
of
love
giants.
that there are hill giants and mountain
Yeah.
giants.
Yeah.
They're slightly smaller.
Yeah. Probably dumber too, but yeah, in the mythology, the giants are kind of like the Titans. They kind of represent like chaotic nature that's not really friendly to man, and the gods have to smack it down and be like, "We're going to make architecture and math or
Stop
whatever."
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Culture.
The frost giants just happen to be the worst ones, like the meanest ones. So that's Jotunheim. Oh, also, it's shaped like a big ring of mountains around the Earth because they didn't have maps back then.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that's the idea. That's Jotunheim.
All right. Well, I guess I can take over with Midgard. I mean, if you've watched any of the movies, you should know what Midgard is. It's Earth.
You're standing in it, buddy.
Duh. That's where you are.
Yeah.
Sum up Earth in one sentence.
Oh, man. Place where the dumb Homo sapiens mess with shit. And the gods are like, yikes. They're obviously not ready to interact with us.
It's very diverse.
Is that one sentence?
That's right. Yeah. You got it.
And then, so yeah, basically where we are, where a lot of the story takes place. Niflheim is basically the very bottom of Yggdrasil. It's also the location of hell. I know Jared was telling us it probably is just the equivalent of hell. It's basically where the souls of the creatures that die in the 9 realms go.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Fun place.
And it's usually icy.
People are dying.
Yeah,
to
which
get
is
there.
really funny because
Yeah.
you would think that like something where souls go, hell or whatever would be fiery. Not this
Well,
one.
isn't it Dante's Inferno that has hell being ice cold at the very bottom?
Yeah, makes sense.
So-
So also, if you think about it, like Vikings, that probably would have dealt with a lot of like frozen eat death people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
Up north, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
The cold.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. The Niflheim is ice. The older one, I don't know how to pronounce this. Moosfulheim.
Yeah.
Muspelheim.
Muspelheim. Yeah.
Muspelheim.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that works for me. That's pretty
Yeah.
good.
But it's basically it's above Asgard, a world that's kind of bathed in flame, and the creatures there just kind of manifest from the fire. So
They're like fiery creatures.
exactly, just think of fire demons, the Balrog from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that's actually a really good visual. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. We've seen Surtur in in Thor Ragnarok, where he's this big demon. And we'll talk about him later. But yeah, that's basically. It's just his pool, his jacuzzi. Yeah, that's what they should. Surtur's jacuzzi. That's it. Yeah.
All right, next we have Elfheim, which
Aw.
sounds just like where the people live.
Do you
Elves.
remember that show Alf from the 90s?
Oh my
That's where
God.
he's from. Sorry. Shh. I'm going to shut up now.
So it's the realm of the elves. There's ice elves and spice elves, air elves, and they're wondrous flying machines.
Wait, did you say spice elves?
I try to skip past that because I have no idea what spice elves are.
It's the good elves, the light elves, and they live the way Noah's describing it was true. They live in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
There's sea elves and their coral castles along the Hummingbird Bay. Triple jointed pleasure elves.
What the? Okay.
Elves of the Vales with their herds of wild corn. Moon elves. Firefly wine. I mean, this place
Firefly wine
just-
sounds good.
Yeah. They literally have candy forests. Like
What?
this place is just bright.
Doesn't Elfheim sound annoying to you?
No, it sounds amazing.
I mean, it's just peace and otherworldly. It's just a big paradise.
And candy and spices.
Yeah. So that's that.
It just seems like
place.
the kind of place where you'd be like, hey, I just want to chill out and get a beer. And they'd be like, we have rum raisin beer. And I'm like, I want to kill everybody here.
You just said firefly, wine? That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also mermaids there. I mean,
Aw.
there's a bunch of like, very mythical kind of nice.
Are
little-
unicorns?
I would think so, maybe.
How would they not?
Yeah. So, and then we have Nidvalir, which
That sounds cool.
Jared had kind of already mentioned where the dwarves are from. So they live underground mostly. That's where Mjolnir's from.
Sometimes.
Stormbreaker also was made there. So
This feels very Tolkien.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if he got it. He stole it from Norse mythology or vice versa.
It's like where they fought, where Gandalf died in Lord of the Rings.
Moria.
That's where this is.
Oh, I was thinking
Essentially.
Erebor.
or that one, whichever one you think is nice enough for the dwarves to live. And then last one we have, I don't know how to say this one, Svartalheim.
Svartalheim.
Okay, that sounds weird to say. Dark Elves. That's where Big Bad Malekith is from. It's Dark Elves. I mean, I don't.
It's
know
gross
what else to say about
and
that.
bog-like. It's kind of just the
It's like
opposite.
swampy.
I was
It's the
gonna say.
opposite of Elfheim. Like they have like scorpions and poisonous stuff.
This is where black licorice is from.
It would also be like if you try to get a beer there, they'd be like, "We have razors shoot in your face." Like that's not really. That's kind of the opposite, actually.
One thing to point out about them, though, is they do have portals that take them to all the 9 realms.
That seems bad.
Yeah, so Dark Elves, why not have a
Oh,
bunch
that's
of
right. They have the
portals?
black Bifrost now. So it's like
Yeah.
an inverted Bifrost. That's how we'll talk about it later, but it's pretty bad.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So that's
We have one realm left. A realm I'm not a fan of. Let's be honest. So heaven. Hell. Yeah, it's super dumb. So they added recently post secret. What was it again? Like Secret Crisis. It was. I did not. Original Sin. That's it. We find out that Angela is Thor's sister. And she's from this realm called Heaven that in time immemorial Asgard was fighting with. And so Odin banished it from all memory and whatever, retcon.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's so basically the point Marvel Comics got the rights to the character Angela, and they were trying to incorporate her into the comic books, and so they said her people are angels from heaven, who are these weird like ninja ladies who also like to bargain. That's like their thing. They
sound very angelic.
yeah, exactly.
Weird.
It's more like the prophecy angels or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they're part of they're like, it's now 10 worlds because Marvel got the copyrights to a minor character from the Spawn universe. Great. hopefully, I mean, I don't know if it's going to stick around. It feels very temporary.
That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
That's probably just going to be wiped from all memory again.
I think so. I think there's
Odin will do it again.
there's a crossover coming up where they get wiped out. Yeah, for sure.
So that's the world building.
That's
Now,
those are the realms.
9/10.
Yeah, 9.2 realms. Lot of the stuff. Okay, so that's the place. Now we got to deal with time, which is an even bigger bitch in a certain way. Because when you talk about Norse time, you have to talk about beginnings and endings, which means you have to talk about Ragnarok.
So we established the worlds, and now we're going to destroy them.
Exactly, yeah. And bring them back, kind of. You guys know about Ragnarok, right? You've heard of it before Thor comics. Like the idea of like...
Yeah, like the Collector and Hulk and like...
Correct.
All that stuff. And Valkyrie.
Yes.
Like, all that.
Yeah,
He said
really
before
good stuff.
Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
Those are Norse mythology things.
Yeah, believe it or not, that was not Snorri Snurlson or whatever his name is. But yeah, no. So Ragnarok is the twilight of the gods, and in Norse mythology, the idea is like all the gods end, and the earth does too, and then everything gets wiped clean with a giant flood because that's how religion works.
Noah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Oh my
Noah
gosh.
did it. It was his
You're
fault.
welcome.
And then things come back to life anew, and there's like a new world. In Marvel Comics, the way it kind of has worked is that for whatever reason, the Norse gods are all on this weird loop where Ragnaroks happen over and over and over again. We've actually, in Thor continuity, seen at least one of these things happen, which is to say Ragnarok take place, everything goes back to nothing and everything like
Then
that.
resets.
And then it resets and Thor comes back and everything like that.
I think it's kind of an interesting way to, if they want to either retcon stuff or start stuff new.
It's like the cycle's built into the mythology, baby.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think this is like one of the only characters where it's like, okay.
That makes
like,
sense.
That can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, just don't have like 3 Ragnaroks in one year, but
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, I mean, so that's absolutely true because you can get these various histories that have happened, and you can always retcon it by saying, "Oh, that happened in that was
Previous
4
cycle."
Ragnaroks ago." That's a long time ago.
Now I'm just picturing Loki talking like that. Like, oh, that betrayal? That was like 7 Ragnaroks ago, man.
Yeah. I mean, stop living in the past. You got to live in this 40,000 year period, not.
I wonder
before.
if, kind of side note, I wonder if they're going to use that with bringing Asgard back in the MCU.
It would that's a real. I feel like I should have thought of that already.
Yeah.
but
Just saying, 'cause,
that's a really good
It
point.
comes back. I mean, they're all in that cycle, and it was called Ragnarok.
Yeah,
I don't know. Just something to think about.
That's a really good point. And I should also mention that the reason this is important in Thor comics is because in a lot of stories, it's about staving off Ragnarok, preventing it. So even though it's this eschatological thing and the world's going to end, it's also constantly like hanging over their shoulders or like above their heads, like the sword of Damocles. And there are all these like little signs that it could be happening. Because the crazy thing is the gods get the prophecy while they're around. It's not just a thing that happens to them. They're like, oh no, if so-and-so, if all the Kit Kats get sold out, we're going to die or whatever. That's not a literal one.
All right. So speaking about time and timelines, let's talk about the publication history of Thor in, well, basically just Marvel. Because there were comics because he's a Norse mythology character, there was comics of Thor and Loki before Marvel. But we're not talking about those. So
it's no
do the
people-
research yourself.
Yeah, when people bring those up, it's always like, well, he actually exists. It's like, no, that doesn't count.
Okay, well, fun fact, I have the first appearance. It's in the late 40s. Anyway.
Yeah.
It's Venus Comics. Look it up if you're interested in that. But the first time, like, Thor, as we know him, appears in Marvel, it's Journey into Mystery number 83, which started in 1962.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, and fun fact, while we were doing research for all of these characters, they basically all came from around the same time within a couple of years, which is kind of unique to any of the other deep dives that we were doing. The characters have been around for a long time, so there's a lot of interesting history there. So yeah, he was introduced in 62 and 63. He became a founding member of the Avengers and Avengers #1.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And then in the 70s and 80s, the stories basically heavily drew from mythology. So a lot of the stories and like plot lines kind of came from there. The kind of standout writer for Thor, creator at the time, was Walt Simonson. Yeah, I knew Jared would do some sort of reaction.
He's like my Shakespeare.
It's kind of like the encyclopedia that authors, I guess, can draw from now when they're writing Thor. It's like, oh, this was the heyday.
Yeah, he's definitely like the definitive writer for Thor.
Yeah.
He's a salvational character too, because he brought they gave him the comic book saying, we're going to cancel this. He was a new writer. Do you want to do this?
Yeah.
And he does this, like, I don't know how many issues, let's say 40 or 50 issues.
He was
maybe
around for a long time.
And he just crushes it and redefines the character.
Yep. He's like created Better Ray Bill, which people are super excited about maybe seeing in the movie.
Horseface.
So yeah, that was 70s, 80s. In the 90s, Thor, along with some other headliners for Marvel, was temporarily removed from main continuity for Heroes Reborn, but he obviously came back relatively quickly because he's an iconic character for Marvel.
They never stay dead.
Okay, and then so this is where it got really complicated. He comes back as Thor in Volume 2, but they keep the dual numbers in order to pay homage to.
And they were doing this Marvel-wide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of hard to follow Thor comics this way though, because he comes back in Volume 2. The numbers are it's number 85/587. Yep. And then Thor Volume 1 was launched in 2007, and the third volume was released in 2009. And reverted in 2009 for Volume 3, reverted to number 600 as look how long he's been around. That was really confusing.
And it was Volume 1 from Thor because it was the Mighty Thor originally, and they're like, no, he's mighty. Let's just get right to Thor. Yeah. Comics. Because comics.
And then around the same time that the Marvel Cinematic Universe started taking up, Thor kind of had three different ones that he was in the main continuity: Thor the Mighty Avenger, Thor First Thunder, and Iron Man / Thor. Again, kind of released around the same time as the cinematic universe was taking off.
That's kind of smart because Iron Man was like building that universe, the cinematic universe.
So they're like, let's put him with Thor.
I read that comic. You want more of it too.
Really?
Honestly, yeah, because I mean, DC is really good about understanding. Let's take two really important characters, give them a series that's kind of about their relationship and their contrast.
Yeah.
So you have Superman, Batman. It's very obvious. And Thor, Iron Man was really cool because it was like, okay, this is like this ancient magical character, and this character is supposed to be like the vanguard of technology, and they have really cool offsets. There's a great moment where Iron Man's like, they're both in space.
Yeah.
And he's like, how are you talking in space? And Thor's like, I'm not from around here. And it's just a great moment.
No, I had no idea it existed, but when I saw that, I was like, I love Tony. Yeah. I love Thor. This sounds fun. Yeah. And then, of course, 2012, Thor God of Thunder with Jason Aaron. Yay. Obviously, kind of the next one. Simonson, Aaron's run as Thor is kind of... Anyway.
I have to agree.
Yeah.
Personally, I think he's the new Walt Simonson, which is going to be a lot of Thor listeners are going to be mad to hear that and probably throw hammers at my car. But
I mean, I think just side note with that. I mean,
hammers.
He's creating.
I get it.
That's what my people do.
I think regardless if you may not like his run or whatever. I mean, his run's going to impact the Thor from here on out. I mean, I'm just because there's so much that's gone into it. So get over it.
Yeah,
it's divisive, but it's still the people that love it really love it.
And from an sort of industry place, the investment they done with it, they let him have these long, protracted stories. They were all interesting. They put some of the best artists in the industry. It's just it's amazing. It's a great time to be a Thor fan, honestly.
Yep. And then 2016 with Jane Foster becoming Thor God of Thunder. They didn't cancel that one. They didn't name it Lady Thor, God of Thunder. But Thor stuck around in The Unworthy Thor for a while, but he's back now. I can't remember what his current... Is it God of Thunder or is it back to the Mighty Thor?
It's back to Thor. So
it's just
Thor again, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Drop the epithet.
Actually, we'll look it up again. I think
it's the Mighty Thor.
No, it's
There's
not the Mighty
many.
Thor, but it might
God
be
of
Thor.
Thunder.
It might be Thor, God of Thunder. Ow. No, I'm going to say it's just Thor. It is just Thor.
The worthy Thor.
Yeah, really. Because
the cross over the un.
It got confusing because even the Jane thing had 2 volumes. So one was the Mighty Thor, and then the next one was Thor.
Yeah.
Or if I ever have that backwards, but either way, and then Unworthy Thor and Thor. Yeah.
Whatever. There's hammers.
Yeah.
But that's a brief breakdown of the fun run that Thor's had in Marvel so far.
All right, jumping right into his origin. Jared's favorite part.
Yes. Me. Oh, jumping now. Yes. Jumping now. Okay. So So Thor, it's important that you understand. So we talked about Ragnarok and we talked about the 9 worlds. No other than the powers mentioned his parentage. And this is sort of a big deal because before you can even have a Thor, sometimes, every once in a while, when the sky loves the earth very much.
Oh my God.
They have a baby.
Yeah.
No, but it
Pretty
is,
much.
Yeah, but it is the case. Back in the old days when the universe was still forming, Odin was kind of an adventuring asshole. He's a lot like Zeus, if you know the Greek mythology and stuff like that. He dresses up like animals or turns into one. That's probably makes more sense. And just has sex with all kinds of stuff. I mean, it really is one of those things where if you look at his kids, only Balder is his kid with Frigga. His wife. Most of his other kids come from different places and it's really weird. So in order to create a more perfect son or like a very powerful heir, he gets with the elder goddess Jord. Or yours, excuse me.
Oh, I thought you said George.
George.
I know they're like fluid and stuff.
No.
It doesn't seem right.
No, in this case, no. But Jord, which is like the earth goddess, and then he makes Thor. And she weans in a cave. She weans him in a cave for like 2 weeks. It's very cave oriented, this story. And then he's like, you don't get this baby. I just needed you. It's almost like that Lady Shiva thing we talked about. I just need a place to make this baby happen. And then they take the baby and he gives it to Frigga to raise. And she knows the whole time that that's not her baby.
I would hope so.
Yeah, exactly. But she still raises it. And because Thor is the son of the earth and the sky, he's super, super powerful. Yeah. So that's basically how it works. Now, but Thor doesn't know this for a long time, and he's just raised as like an Asgardian kid, just a royal asshole, just bouncing around Asgard, ruining, fighting giants and stuff like that, what you expect they would do. And the truth is that before Mjolnir is in the picture, Thor is still really trying to get like the approval of his dad. And he kind of goes to Earth a lot, not really being super, let's say, genteel about that process. He goes and murders things. He has one moment where he fights Apocalypse for a while. Yeah, the prehistory Thor is actually super interesting. And in this period, in like the 9th century BC, or no, AD, he ends up sort of making friends with these Vikings. He does it several times, but and they begin to worship him, which we get the sense this is actually the beginning of like the worship generally, like of Norse mythology. Yeah. And this is why the Vikings look like the Asgardians. I don't know if you picked up on that. The idea is that the Asgardians have always looked that way, and the Vikings were just trying to copy them or something like that. But there's a point at which Thor's followers begin sacking Christians and killing people in his name. Jeez. And then he's like, yeah, this isn't such a good thing for me to do.
Yikes.
I'm going to withdraw. So so Thor in these days is still really hot-headed and everything like that, and trying to figure out how to be worthy of his father and the hammer Mjolnir, which either, again, it doesn't really matter what history you do. Either you think that Odin made it for Thor, but had to wait and blessed it to wait till he became worthy, or you think that Odin just used to have it for a long time. Either way, Thor has to wait till he becomes worthy to wield it. And he does eventually do that. I mean, there's like, so it's like back to that Ragnarok thing. There's so many stories that prove why he finally became worthy.
Yeah.
But he finally does. Probably stops murdering people indiscriminately. That's probably a big part of it.
Yeah, I know I can't remember what comic it was, but I remember him like killing a bunch of giants and then going to where the hammer was and trying to pick it up. And he's like, I'm not worthy yet. Then he would go and like drink a bunch of beer and sleep with a bunch of women and then try to do it again. It's like, dude, I think you're not understanding what worthy means.
Yeah. Usually the story is Asgard's being invaded and he goes to grab the hammer to help or something to that effect. That's usually how it goes. But anyway, so he finally is worthy of the hammer Mjolnir, and this is where it gets, from a character standpoint, super confusing, because around about that time we expect, or at least some point after that, Odin is like, you still aren't worthy enough. Because that's like a big theme with him and his dad. Is like, so Odin decides he needs humility, and sends Thor down to Earth. Yeah, which is how you obviously train a child. Like, this is like the Asgardian version of military school, apparently. So to teach him that, he sends him to Earth and wipes his memory and puts him in the body of a mortal doctor who's got a disabled leg or whatever. He's got a limp. which I guess is the opposite of being a thunder god, is a doctor. I don't know. But either way. So, so he has to figure, for 10 years, he stays as a doctor, not knowing he's the god of thunder. Maybe this will happen to all of us. I really hope I'm some sort of god, like a barista who then found out later on he has the power of the ocean. Anyway, yeah.
Nope, just coffee beans.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Donald Blake.
Yeah, Donald Blake. After about 10 years, Odin puts in his head that he should go to Norway. Just kind of like find out about his heritage or something like that. So he does that. And while there, he is attacked by the stone men from Saturn. I bet you didn't see that coming.
What?
Yeah, so the Cronins, who, Korg is one of these people. They are from Saturn or near it. I don't know, something like that.
They're the rings.
Yeah,
They're from
exactly.
the rings.
Yeah, or maybe it's the last stop. Who knows? So they attack Donald while he's on vacation, and he wants to save himself, so he ducks into this cave. And he's like, well, I got to find some sort of weapon to fight these colossi or whatever. And he finds this stick, and he bangs it on the cave wall. And it turns out to be Mjolnir. And he finds out, I guess I'm Thor now.
So he just happened to bang the stick on the wall?
Out of frustration. You know how you will do that?
All these rock giants just hitting it.
It's like one of those... It's one of those like Shakespearean moments where he's like, oh, damn it. And he hits it. Mm. Yeah. So this is basically the beginning of Thor comics as we know it. And what's interesting, I don't know if a lot of people know this, for about like 10 issues or so, he doesn't realize he's actually Thor. He thinks
so it's
he's
just like a weird soap opera?
Well, Donald Blake thinks that he's just been given the power of Thor. Mm. And at this time, he's still bound. I mean, for most of the early history, he has to hold on to Mjolnir, and if he doesn't, he'll transform back into Donald Blake. He has 60 seconds. So he's away from the hammer for a minute, which is a real disadvantage if you think about the fact that one of the chief ways that he uses this thing is throwing it away. I mean, it comes back, and that's cool, but you can also feel a little comic editorial sort of stuff where they're trying to build in a kryptonite. Yeah. That is, let's make this, a super powerful character, but if he doesn't have the hammer, he kind of
turns into a limpy doctor.
Yes, exactly. But finally it's revealed to him when he goes back up to Asgard that he is in fact Thor, and it was the whole thing. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's true that Odin wiped his memory and convinced him he wasn't Thor. Like, I don't know how that teaches you humility.
Odin seems to do that a lot, wiping things from memory.
I know, it's his big thing, but the other thing, if you think about it, like, he's like, I want to teach you humility and making you one of the most respected surgeons in the country.
And also not knowing what you're supposed to get humility for.
I know. He makes Thor... His idea to make him humble is the same reason Doctor Strange was arrogant in the beginning of the movie. I don't know why that is. But so this is like the basic like Thor adventure time. And as Kayla mentioned, this is also when he helps found the Avengers. Mm-hmm. Now, the Avengers are started the first... It's very similar to the movie. I actually thought they kind of got at least the spirit of this right, which is that Loki's trying to screw with Thor, and so he confuses all the rest of the Avengers, so they all fight. But it forms it because he's an evil...
I just love chaos.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and the idea, of course, is like the Earth's mightiest Avengers get together when there's an evil more powerful than any of them can overcome. Even though at this point, Thor has beaten Loki like 9 times by himself. But whatever.
Your word choice, though, the fact that he doesn't go after them or attack them, he confused the other Avengers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It reminds me of the fight of Iron Man and Thor in the forest in the first one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of Thor's early adventures, and all the powers that Noah mentioned are basically on the table and things like that. And he's got this alter ego and he's got to live, and that's where he knows Jane and meets her and everything like that. There's been some sort of kind of implication that like it's just through meeting her that he has a relationship with Earth, but really, I mean, he's kind of always been fascinated with the Earth, and also he's got this, he's got a life there.
Well, I mean, he was worshipped before then, and then he murdered a whole bunch of people on Earth. So fascination is an interesting way of putting it.
They were playthings, and then he loved them, and then
it's a really cool like way that they handled it, because I think all of the pre-Avengers stories, Thor always is fascinated with the Earth, and even though he doesn't always know that his mom is a Earth, like what do you call it, like a is essentially Gaia, like the spirit of the earth. He always cares for them and feels bad, but his interactions always kind of either went badly or he turned them all into murderers accidentally or whatever. So in some sense, in his history, you can think about like his time with the Avengers and everything like that as the first time that he's like, able to integrate in some meaningful way.
I have friends here.
Or whatever. Yeah.
So Thor's had about 60 years of continuity from then till now. But to kind of briefly summarize it, Thor's stories are usually a high-octane blend of like fantasy meets superhero storytelling, equal parts cosmic melodrama, and mythologically inspired like swashbuckling adventure. Thor uses his strength, his thunder powers, and his hammer Mjolnir. Come on. To defend all the realms from threats like evil gods, demons, space monsters, and rogue superhumans. There's been a lot of storytelling, but like I said, the themes usually are sort of like Thor's struggle for worthiness, being torn between Asgard and Midgard, struggling to live as like a god among men and the kind of Superman variety, and staving off the inevitable. So that's basically
The
Thor's-
Ragnaroks.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically Thor's origin. But you can't really understand him without understanding his dad, Odin. Yeah. Odin, in certain ways, is the character, the kind of creator god that puts all of this cosmology into place. And in the comics, it gets a bit confusing because I think one of the things we should have talked about earlier, but we kind of didn't, now's a good time, is what are the Asgardians? I mean, the comic books have really been back and forth about what they are just in the first place. So are they just aliens who have really powerful magic?
Yes.
You know, or are they the gods in the mythological sense? The comic books are exactly right. The comics are never clear about this. Stan Lee's and Jack Kirby's version of this character was that they're really more kind of science-y aliens who also know magic. Walt Simonson takes a turn directly into the mythology.
Yeah.
Unapologetically so.
Well, I think it's good because it's a distinguishing factor for that mythos and Thor.
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Absolutely. So, but it's important because with Odin, he kind of goes back between an omnipotent god who literally creates galaxies or wipes them out for that matter.
Or erases their memory.
Exactly. Or just a really big Asgardian that blasts people.
For the fun of it.
Yeah, but I mean like just a kind of Thor level character who has energy blasts. And I say that because it kind of goes up and down throughout the comic books. Thor's relationship to Odin, of course, is also turbulent. It's one of either Odin is like a Santa Clausian figure who's just nice and I'm so proud of you, boy. Let's stop these demons. Or he's deeply bitter about how Thor's not staying on Asgard enough and overly involved in Midgard.
Well, that's his
and
fault.
Stuff like that.
He sent him there.
Yeah. And the characterization is pretty distinct. I mean, like he isn't always. I don't think they have decided whether Odin's going to be an asshole or not.
I feel like he is sometimes a good father, but he's always a bad person.
He's like
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, he's like a good tough love type dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Most of the stories I've read, he's been kind of a dick. So
Yeah,
because you've read a lot of the Jason Aaron stuff, and it's weird because Jason Aaron's Odin is almost unprecedentedly mean.
Good.
And also like when Jane became Thor, his attitude has been very much like, I don't like your boobies. You're too much of a girl. Like, where did you come from? Yeah.
the Valkyrie are right there, Odin.
Yeah,
I know.
exactly. So he exists somewhere in between that. He's, I guess, the first major Asgardian, too. He's had these other characters that are like Bor and Buri, but they're just sort of these old, powerful characters. They seem to exist before most of the myths and most of the, like, what we know of as, like, Asgard and stuff like that. I can't even begin to list all of his powers.
Well, you did throughout his origin story. Odin can do amazing things and uses them terribly.
But
creates universes and destroys them.
Exactly. But some signature stuff. He has the Odin Force. This is something in Thor comics you hear a lot, which is the nigh ultimate power that exists within him that's also connected to Asgard itself.
It's very humble for him to name his own force after himself.
Oh, all of his stuff. It's like, this is the Odin spear and the Odin...
the Odin sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the Odin seat.
I'm glad you mentioned that because he regularly, if he has one weakness, and I guess one thing that makes him not just completely unbeatable is that he'll go every once in a while have to recharge into Odin sleep. It's like a Duracell battery kind of thing.
He overchannels his force.
Yeah,
goes
he's
to bed.
narcoleptic.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it's down to.
And a lot of times, like, I think this is how he dies in Thor Ragnarok, though they're super vague about that, is that he didn't get a nap, so he's gonna die.
He's dead now.
Yeah.
But I think Anthony Hopkins was just kind of like, nah, I'm done being this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true too. And oftentimes it's much like Thor losing the hammer, and now he can be beaten because he's got this inherent kryptonite if he doesn't have the hammer, and he becomes similarly if they want to have somebody's invading Asgard story. Well, how are you going to do that when they basically have God on the throne?
Yeah.
Well, he had to take a sleep.
He's in bedtime.
Yeah.
Or he's hiding in his freaking throne room or something.
He had some Odin NyQuil, and he's just going to be out for a while. But yeah, so there's been a bunch of stories where he's been either asleep, or another thing, he loves to fight Surtur and kill Surtur and be killed in the process.
Goes to Muspelheim. Hey, fire demon!
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of Odin. I'll say the last thing is that he created Mjolnir, like I mentioned before, and also the Destroyer armor. A lot of the stuff he makes ends up being a real problem, honestly. He made Loki. That was an issue. Yeah.
Hey,
Thor.
Yeah.
That's the one good thing Odin has done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Oh yeah, not the hero of this story, but Loki.
Yeah.
We know where my allegiances lie.
Yeah. But in Norse mythology, he's the god of wisdom too, so he does have this sense of like always kind of knowing better than that. His mystery often does facilitate a lot of stories because Thor has to figure out, why has Odin kept something a secret? What does Odin know? What is he getting me for Christmas? Or what,
Yeah, I think that's been lost a little bit, at least in like the Jason Aaron run, because he just seems like kind of an ignorant asshole now. So,
well, it's good that you mentioned that because that leads me to Freya. Well, or Frigga, again, we've talked about this before. It's a little bit of both. Yeah, exactly. I think some of Jason Aaron's decision to underemphasize and buffoonerate Odin is to make room for this other character in Freya. He calls her Freya. Again, in the mythology, it was Frigga. It used to be Frigga in the comics. They've moved
and
her.
And they used Frigga in the
this.
movie too, right?
yeah.
Yes. And it is still unclear to me why she's Freya
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Freya is the goddess.
She has Fra in her
Well, I was
name,
going to say, but Freya's another god.
Well,
that-
Freya, and Freya's a more badass god in the mythology. She's not just a fertility goddess, but also a goddess of war.
Yeah.
She's way closer to Athena
Yeah.
in the way the range of things she does, her attitude. She's very smart. She hates Loki in the mythology, weirdly enough. In this case, she's the main matriarch of the Asgardian world, and
The All-Mother.
the All-Mother, indeed, and one of the only people that can turn Odin, like, can basically tell him to shut up and you don't know what you're doing.
She has the off button to his berserker mode.
Yeah.
She probably knows how to put him to sleep. She go to sleep, and he like falls asleep.
She's a good combination of like a warrior badass, a very Xena-esque character who also has, we're not really sure yet, they've only fleshed it out a bit, but some vague but mysteriously powerful magic.
I was going to say.
Whenever I was looking her up to like really get her history, literally in the power section, it says, powers unknown. I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah. And some of that is, and the reason we're talking about it is because she's become crucially important in the comics in the last 15 years, but because she's this supporting character, and she's relatively new in terms of how much time she's gotten on the panel, she hasn't been fully explored yet. So we can look forward to that. But that's basically Freya.
What is a superhero without their love interest?
Yeah.
Jane Foster. So she first appeared in Journey into Mystery number 84, which was very close to when Thor came around too, in September 1962. So her early life is super tragic. I'm sorry to bring the mood down.
Oh,
but
God.
So Jane Foster's mother died of cancer when she was young. Her father worked 2 jobs in order to get her through medical school. However, Jane's father died from complications of a heart attack. So both of her parents died of medical,
Ism.
I don't know what I was trying to say there. So fast forward, meeting Thor, she became a nurse hired by Dr. Donald Blake to assist him in his private medical practice. How fortunate. While providing medical help during a civil war in San Diablo, Blake fell in love with Jane, and Jane fell in love with Thor. Not Donald Blake, because she did not know that Donald Blake and Thor were the same person.
Wow.
So that's kind of sad.
Clark Kent,
Yeah.
Superman.
Exactly. Yep.
It's like, oh, a doctor with a crooked leg? I don't think so. I'm into this.
Yeah. Which is funny.
Thunder God.
She would talk to Donald Blake about like swoon over Thor.
Oh my God.
But he's kind of like, oh, she'll never love a regular person like me.
If only I was me.
Yeah. So fast forward a few Loki hypnotizing her and kidnappings. So Thor wanted to marry Jane Foster. Odin said nah, because she was a mortal and not a goddess. Thor later asked Odin to reconsider his offer. Odin...
Please, Dad.
Yeah, pretty much. Odin was like, okay, you can marry her if she proves herself worthy. So... criminal Mr. Hyde decided to kidnap Donald Blake and Jane. When that happened, he put Blake into a room with a bomb for some reason, and Blake turned into Thor, escaped, but Jane didn't know that. So she was like, oh, I'm going to help Dr. Hyde escape. That way she can save Donald Blake. Well, he was already free, and that proved her not worthy to Odin for some reason.
Yeah, nobody's good enough for Odin. Yeah. That's a big part of this.
Oh, she helped the villain escape, so nah, you're not worthy. It's like, well, she didn't know. She was trying to save Thor. So that was attempt to marry number 1. Attempt to marry number 2. This time, Jane knows Thor is Blake, or Blake is Thor, or whatever, vice versa. Thor petitions Odin to let him marry Jane Foster again. He brought her to Asgard.
He's like, I really like this girl.
Yeah,
She's great.
literally brought her to Asgard, which is a huge no-no. Don't bring any mortals to Asgard. So Odin was like, fine, you can marry Foster if she proves herself worthy as an Asgardian goddess. So what does he do? Gives her powers of a goddess. Randomly. She doesn't know this was going to happen.
She's the goddess of what now?
Just
Confusion.
Because she gets these powers, changes how she looks, and she's super confused. So in her confusion, Odin's like, nope, she can't handle these powers, banishes her back to Earth, wipes her memory of Thor and Donald
hilarious.
Blake, and was like, not worthy anymore.
That's hilariously awful.
Sif is pissed the whole time.
But kind of a good thing. When Foster went back to Earth with her memory wiped of Thor, she fell in love with a physician named Dr. Keith Sincade. So, yay. They fell in love,
Gets
got
a happily
married.
ever after.
Yeah, but Thor was super upset about it.
And it's funny, too, because I don't...
Sif's right there, Thor.
Yeah.
Well, if Odin was like, Thor, why do you love this girl so much? And he's like, she's the only one I've met.
Pretty much. Okay, so fast forward again. Years later, Foster fell ill. She was close to death, and in her delirious deathbed state, she called out to Thor. And at this point, Thor and Sif are together, because that's just what had to happen, I guess. And Sif, I guess in kind of her love for Thor, wanted to help Jane because she knew how much they meant to each other. So she stole this enchanted rune staff of an elder of the universe and gave her life force to Jane. And doing that made Sif vanish. So
That's sad.
And Jane was saved. But it turned out that she went into the staff. The elder that the staff came from was actually a bad guy. And when Sif, or Jane at this point, hit Sif's sword onto a wall, she turned into Sif.
You get it?
Oh my God.
We were talking about this last night. I kind of love this, and I wish that they had done it more. So now Jane is like an analog to Thor or Donald Blake in this way, that like they both have an enchanted weapon that they become gods
But
and
they're
stuff like
so
that.
cool. They're cool by themselves.
Yeah.
You don't need to combine
sure.
2 cool women characters
Yeah.
into one.
But they
woman
weren't
character.
at the time.
Ah,
Oh, they really weren't. Like Jane was kind of very. Bleh.
yeah.
She gets way better.
Well, of course,
yeah.
because they're like, oh, we can actually use this character and not
Yeah.
like shoehorn the same trope in her freaking story.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the merge Sif thing is just a unique little thing that happened with Jane. So that gets all sorted out. Jane eventually becomes a doctor, working alongside Thor in New York when Odinson was secretly using the body of EMT Jake Olsen. Creepy. Again, he's posing as somebody else. So Jared already talked about that one. She became a consulting physician for Tony Stark. During Civil War, she opposed the Registration Act and joined the Secret Avengers, treating many of its members. So that's kind of her history in between her origin, and then now my favorite part of Jane is becoming Thor. So while Thor was away fighting Gore the God Butcher, Jane was diagnosed with breast cancer. Just her mother died of cancer, and now she's diagnosed with cancer. She accepted Thor's invitation to represent Asgard in the Congress of Worlds. So essentially it's a big meeting, kind of like the UN, but of the 9, 10, whatever.
I think there'd be
realms.
someone else qualified to represent Asgard.
Yeah, or to represent Midgard than Jane, which I guess it's just her worthiness that made him think of her.
Well, it's a weird thing because Midgard doesn't know about most of the rest of the realms.
Yeah.
So in that Congress of Worlds, it would be like if in our Congress, Hawaii didn't know about the United States.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so you have this random human chose to represent your entire world or your realm.
Oh, wait.
But she's not even from.
But Jane knows more. I mean, this is true. Jane knows more about the Asgardians than almost any other person.
Yeah.
So now that does make sense, actually, a little bit.
I mean, it does, but also it's kind of not a democracy at that point.
No, that's a
because
good point.
she's the one that's advocating for everything. So anyway, while she's there, a lot of people in Asgard were trying to give her magical medical treatment for her breast cancer because they can just get rid of it super easy. But Jane, being the noble person that she is and the physician that she is, she does not want any type of magical treatment, which I have to...
That's dumb.
It is dumb, but it
That's
also...
No, I got your explanation right here because of Jason Aaron.
Yeah.
So
Jason
Aaron
Aaron's
had...
dumb?
No, well, maybe, but hear me out. Jason Aaron had written the Doctor Strange series and had said that... Do you want to take it over? Because this is you love
You're
Doctor
literally
Strange.
explaining it.
Oh, okay. Well, I was saying, so Doctor Strange in Jason Aaron's comic discovered that all magic has a cost. And so Jane's actually, rather than just be like, I don't want your help to get rid of these tumors, she's like, I don't know what the cost for your help would be. So she's actually kind of hesitant.
I would have gambled it, but
Me too.
That's fine because it could have just turned like somebody into a frog. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, at least they're still alive.
Yeah.
So anyway, during a battle against Nick Fury, when he's the unseen, that's a story for another time, Thor becomes unworthy, lost his ability to wield the hammer, left it on the moon. The hammer calls out to Jane. Jane shows up on the moon thanks to Heimdall and picks up the hammer. She becomes Thor, turning her into this badass masked Asgardian warrior. But she hides her identity from everybody. And when Jane becomes Thor, she's right smack dab in the middle of Malekith the Accursed's alliance with the Frost Giants. So that's pretty much where her story picks up. She's the starting point to the big event War of Realms. Like she's right in the thick of it. This whole alliance with the Frost Giants and Malekith was to bring Loki's father, the king of Frost Giants, back to life.
Lao Fei.
Lao Fei. So the original Thor caught up with Jane and demanded his hammer back. Does not work out well. Hammer doesn't want no unworthy Thor and stays with Jane. Thor ultimately accepted that the hammer had a new owner and gave Jane his blessing and also relinquished his name as Thor.
That moment is very much like a stepdad situation where Thor's like, "Come on, you're mine," and the hammer's like, "I think you're drunk."
Which, to be fair, he probably was.
Yeah. No,
So fast forward, and it's explained, and this is where kind of her kryptonite comes into play. Unfortunately, all the progress from the chemotherapy she gets, because when she throws Mjolnir away, she turns back into weak, sick Jane Foster.
Yeah.
And whenever she gets the hammer, all the toxins are taken out of her body from chemotherapy. But since tumors are technically part of your body, it doesn't take it out. So that makes sense.
it registers the chemo as like poison.
Yes, and it takes it out, but it takes all of that progress away. So every time she turns into Jane, she becomes sicker when she turns back out.
You mean Thor? Every time she turns into Thor. Yeah.
God, so many people turning into different people. So towards the end of the story, Doctor Strange pretty much tells her, if you turn into Thor one more time, That's it.
You're gonna die.
Yeah, you either stay as Thor forever or you're just gonna die. So everybody convinces Jane, hey, don't do this anymore. Just get treatment. See if you can beat this. But what happens other than Mangog going to throw New Asgardia into the sun?
That's a very efficient way of getting rid of a place.
Yeah. So in order to stop Mangog, she turns into Thor again, ties these chains to Mjolnir and also to Mangog, and throws him and Mjolnir into the sun. And that turns her back into Jane. She dies in Thor's arms. They share one last kiss. And that's the death of Thor. But wait!
Because no one stays dead in comics.
No, not even Jane Foster. So Thor's really sad. He brings Jane back to the moon where all the rest of the Asgardians are. Odin's there as well. He tries to use, I guess, his version of Odin force, his life force, to bring back Jane. He takes that storm, that celestial storm that's
The God Tempest.
The God Tempest. There we go. I couldn't remember the name. Takes it, puts it into Jane. That's not enough. Odin uses his life force as well to bring back Jane. And that's it. That's the story of Jane being Thor.
Your favorite.
Yes, but I mean, I think the coolest thing about this is even if you feel like Jane was pushed into being Thor or was forced upon people, you can't deny that she had some amazing moments. I mean, the hammer did things that Thor couldn't even do with the hammer. Like, he even saw it and was like, I can't do that. What the hell? It's like, yeah, this is really cool.
It was like writing letters and voting. It was like seriously doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good story, regardless if you agree with Thor being a woman or not. The execution of the story is amazing, and definitely give it a chance if you haven't read it. This is what got me into Thor.
Yeah.
I mean, Thor has been around for a long time, and this story...
Since the 60s.
Yeah. The God Butcher story leading up to Jane is what got me into Thor, so just saying.
Yeah,
Get
that's
into
good
it.
stuff.
All right, next one.
Of course. I love Sif so much, and that's who I'm starting with. So she hasn't been around quite as long as Jane, but she came in, it was Stanley Jack Kirby, Journey into a Mystery number 102, so 1964, so about 2 years after Thor and Jane were, created. She's in the movies and not utilized as she should have been, but she's played by the beautiful Jamie Alexander.
Where did she go?
I don't know.
We don't know.
After
They never said.
The second one, she just...
Yeah, and they even got the actress back for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I was like, she still was there.
She was really cool. I think when they introduced Valkyrie, it made her, in a casting sense, redundant. I agree, though. I like her a lot.
They
like
could have more than one female character in a movie.
What? I don't know if that's
I'm
even...
just saying. I know it's kind of...
it's... Okay. Well.
But basically, she, in relationship to Thor, because of course that's the lens we're doing these characters through, is a very steadfast ally and sometimes lover, because again, Jane's there too, so it makes it complicated. She was originally, or is now, Heimdall's sister, but she was originally Baldur's sister, which gets creepy because Baldur has a crush on Sif now.
Ew.
But they're not related now, so that's okay.
I like how they're like, let's retcon this just so that way there can be some like crush happening.
Yeah. and to be fair, it's like a lot of pantheons where like, even if they're not brother and sister,
Incest
they're
is fine.
Well, they're only like two people as a start. It's like Adam and Eve. It's like everybody's going to be kind of related early on.
But yeah, so she's Heimdall's sisters now. Baldur has a crush on her. She's basically a childhood friend of Thor and Baldur's companion, going on adventures while they were young. But of course, I kind of describe her as Mjolnir sexual because she's attracted to basically anyone that has wielded Mjolnir.
I've never heard that before. That's hilarious.
See, I mean, it's like when Better Ray Bill gets it, she's like,
It's totally true.
I mean, and then like Eric Masterson, he has like Thor's subconscious in him, but she's like,
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, anyone who's worthy of Thor, I don't know if she and Jane had any interactions, but
That's hot.
They did interact, and I believe there was a moment in Unworthy Thor where she defended Jane being Thor, because I think she was like, what, a woman can't be Thor and
Like,
hold
first
the
of all,
hammer?
girl power, first of all.
But I also think she just kind of has a crush on anyone that Mjolnir deems as worthy.
I agree. I'm for it.
She is kind of regarded as the best female warrior in Asgard. Brunhilde sometimes shares the title, or sometimes it just depends on the comic whether or not Brunhilde is her equal, slightly stronger, slightly weaker.
Forced to be reckoned with.
Yeah. And Sif is actually one of the people that Odin was like, Thor, if you're going to settle down, Sif is right there.
That's true.
Yeah.
So after the whole Jane Foster business, like the first time after he leaves her, after I'm guessing the 2 marriage attempts, Odin kind of sets them up and they fall in love. So I'm guessing they're together when she comes back to save Jane. I didn't realize we were talking about how intertwined Jane and Sif's stories are. We didn't kind of realize that
That's
they
the
pop
love
up.
triangle thing
Yeah,
again.
yeah, exactly. But so
It's a thing in comics too. It's like one of the reasons Thor and Sif don't usually end up together is they're too good together.
yeah.
Like from a writing standpoint, they always feel like, well,
This is
there's
perfect.
there's no tension. Where does this go? Because they're so obviously perfect for each other. So they usually have to like create some great distance where he wants to be with her, but he's in the Black Galaxy or something like that.
Or merge her with his ex.
Exactly. Yeah.
And see, even when Loki is palling around with Thor and they're kind of on good terms, Sif is just like, no, he's a snake. And
Literally.
I thought it's so funny because it's in mythology too, I think. But when Sif is born with blonde hair, blue eyes, like most of the Azir are,
Yep.
but Loki does his little Lokiness and her hair falls out and then it grows back black.
Yeah.
She looks cooler this way, I think.
Oh,
But
yeah.
she hates him.
It distinguishes her too, because a lot of them are blonde haired.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, it's totally true though, because Thor will bring Loki back from the dead like he always does. And he's like, I brought my brother back.
Isn't this
and,
great?
And she's like, I'll stab him in the mouth. And then stab him.
I'm just gonna
Let's
kill him
stab
again right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But there have been a few times when Sif has gone against Thor. You kind of talked about Thor's reign when he merges Asgard and Midgard together. He exiles Sif, so he doesn't kill her, which
You just get out.
he marries Amora and has a son, Magi. I don't know.
Magni.
Maggie. That's-
Magni.
I know, but Maggie sounds hilarious. So
Which I'm sure they would call him
He's
that.
Maggie now. And okay, so Magni, Sif convinces Magni to turn against his father, and then Magni dies, and that's when Thor's like, "Holy shit, I messed up," and then goes back and corrects that timeline.
Retcons.
During Ragnarok, she survives longer than a lot of the major Azir, just Thor side characters. She loses an arm in the first wave, still hanging in there, and then dies with the rest of them towards
It's
the end.
so cool.
It's definitely one of her shining moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's just badass fighter.
It's funny too. She's the goddess of the hunt in Norse mythology.
Yeah.
But I've never seen her hunt anything in the comics. We're
Except
just
for frost giants.
yeah. Even then, she like stabs them.
Yeah.
No
bow and arrow.
Stabbing guys.
One of the last kind of defining moments for Sif in comics is after Ragnarok takes place and Thor's going around finding their souls and like kind of resetting the pantheon. She is placed into the body of an elderly lady who's presumably dying of cancer.
Yep.
Mrs. Chambers, Loki gives her this mirror where she can see herself in the mirror, but no one else recognizes her
Yep.
because, Loki they hate each other so much.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes Sif really look inward and reflect on what she has, like her life, and she's in this mortal dying body now. So
Oh, also Loki had stolen her body and was a girl.
yeah.
In that
No,
period.
she's completely disturbed when she gets
Yeah.
her body back and was like, "Oh my god, Loki was inside this body,
Yeah.
being me."
I think that is really interesting. And I think, wasn't it Jane Foster that found out that Sif was in that body?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jane and actually Loki eventually is just like, "Okay, I'm gonna breadcrumb," and then Jane finds out, and then
Yeah.
she's restored and joins Thor in exile because Thor decides that Oklahoma would be a cool place to put New Asgard.
I mean, it's plainy. It's big,
Yeah.
they can see threats.
There's
coming.
room.
It's like what, Brexton,
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
It's Broxton, Oklahoma.
It's
And I
hilarious.
think that is the idea. Is like when they're finally, oh, Thor's taking over part of. We can't have that. Where Oklahoma? Yeah, you can keep it.
No one lives there.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, you could have picked that or like Utah or like
Yeah.
any other states people forget that exist.
Any rectangular state aliens can have.
But no, it's basically Sif. I mean, she, again, is a steadfast ally to Thor. basically throughout. And only when Thor kind of goes off the deep end does Sif ever think of betraying him or kind of not aligning herself with him.
She's like an extreme force to like put him back on track.
Yeah. I mean, it's different for Heimdall, her brother, and we'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about some other steadfast allies of Thor, the Warriors 3.
Hell yeah.
Yay!
Depending on the story, they are taken very seriously or are comic relief, but they're always fun. So they came in 1965. So again, all of these characters basically have a whole bunch of history. So just to touch on them, my personal favorite, Fendral, dashing, because if a character has charisma, I'm kind of weak for that. So he's basically the swashbucklery, romantic one of the Warriors 3.
Errol Flynn kind of dude.
Yeah. And he and Hogan kind of go toe to toe sometimes because Fendral is very optimistic and he's known for his bravery, but he also gets them into situations that could have been avoided if he wasn't being himself.
Yep.
He's also, depending on the story, a bit of a womanizer. One of the more interesting stories that I was reading about, it takes place on the Isle of Freya, and he is kind of forced to feel and realize what he had done to all of the women that he had been like flirting with and womanizing, and it gets so bad and dark that he contemplates committing suicide because he was just like, oh my god, all of these people I
mean, that's a
broke
good
their
way
hearts.
to like straighten somebody out.
Yeah, it's like, this is what you did.
Yeah.
And especially because they live forever, so it's thousands of years worth of heartbreak.
Do you guys remember when we all went there and you did that to me and then we fixed me? That was great.
It's a great learning experience
great.
for him.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, he's kind of the optimist, the romantic. This is why he's my favorite. The second one, Hogan, the Grim, not from Asgard, and I couldn't find the place where he was from.
He's from Vanaheim.
Okay.
He's one of the Vanir.
Okay. Yeah, he had to flee when Mogul of the Mystic Mountain took over Vanaheim.
Hate that dude.
I know, right?
Damn
Hogan
you.
agrees.
Yeah.
But he's kind of the exact opposite of Fendral in terms of like personality. He's pessimistic. Deadpan snarkers are also one of my types, but you know.
I mean, with the name like Hogan the Grim,
Yeah.
I would assume that he's a little downy.
Yeah, he's a brooding pessimist, but he's also very loyal to Thor. I think I can't remember if they used Fenris or Fenrir, but like he kind of came involved with the Warriors 3 in like this really intense prank where they had to pet that wolf.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. And then after that, antics, friends for life. The last one, and he actually had the most kind of there was Volstagg, the Valiant.
He's my favorite.
Yeah, and I feel like his own stories are kind of cyclical, the way that Thor's and Ragnarok kind of makes Thor's stories. But he's pretty old for an Asgardian in general.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's the oldest of the Warriors 3. Initially and close to his creation, a quote about the character was that he is the last to battle and the first to claim victory. So, you know, he was kind of started off as like the bigger, like doofus like character who's just like very enthusiastic about everything and endearing in that way, but also kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
Always hungry too.
Yeah, I mean, he was silly and drunk and he would have serious moments, but not a lot towards the beginning. And who he is or was just depends on which writer was writing what story at the time and what the story necessitated. It wasn't until later that he became more serious, more heroic. They would focus more on, because he's so much older, he was like the best warrior in his prime.
They've done flashbacks where he's like big and muscular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that beer gut. He's actually young and muscly. So that was the 70s and 80s. It was kind of when Simonson kind of went back to drawing from the mythology. They started taking Volstagg a little bit more seriously. And towards the late 80s, that's when he became kind of what he is now most of the time. Kind of like the lovable bear of a man who is very like, he has a stout heart, but he also is a little bit silly. You know?
Big beer-bellied, pink-wearing.
I love their
amazing
nicknames, by the way. It's Fandral the Dashing, Hogan the Grim, and you said it used to be Volstagg the Valiant.
Yeah.
But more recently, it's Volstagg the Voluminous.
Oh my god.
Because he is, and I feel like this is great because I feel like we're like the Warriors 3 because Ever the Optimist, Killers, obviously Fandral the
I'm my
Dashing.
favorite.
I know what you're gonna say for me.
You're relatively
The
grim in your outlook and your want to hit people.
I love this now, actually. This is amazing.
And you'll hit people with mace. But and then I, of course, am very
The glutton.
fat of personality, like Volstagg the Voluminous. Man, this really connects to our personalities too easily.
I know, this is hilarious, and I love it.
Nice.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to be the best fighter, though.
that's true. He's
Yeah.
the coolest.
Yes, there's no question. Yeah.
Hey, he did stand up to Hela in Thor Ragnarok.
The best, yeah.
Yeah.
The best.
I
Just
mean,
gonna
he
point
had
that out.
actually an on death.
And he also killed
on-screen
Seth, the
death.
serpent god of death. I bet you guys, if you ever get a chance to check that out. He threw Black Knight, who had become a hardened metal object because the curse of the Ebony Blade, through Seth when he was a giant snake. It's a great moment. Anyway, good job. Good job on that.
You're welcome.
But yeah,
Your
to
grimness.
wrap up Volstagg, he's a man with a song in his heart was how they
No.
described him, and I loved that. So yes, the Warriors 3, steadfast allies of Thor as well.
Oh, real quick, he's recently become the War Thor too, or was. He had so it was an awful moment for him where he became possessed by the.
Yikes.
I love it.
Yeah.
I only because it's so different from that character, but he just became so rampagey and
Yeah.
he looked badass.
Yeah, completely badass. Yeah,
All his ear have the capability of going into the berserker mode.
that's true.
So last one for me, we have to touch on Heimdall.
Yay! Rest in peace.
He's not only in the movie.
Yeah, Idris Elba is amazing. Anyway, he was been there since the beginning, basically. In the first issue that Thor appeared, 1962, number 85, Journey into Mystery. He's, like I'd said, brother of Sif. The all-seeing sentry of Asgard stands on the Rainbow Bridge to watch out for enemies. A big difference with Heimdall, though, is his loyalties tend to be Asgard specifically and Odin a lot of the time. So he actually goes toe-to-toe with Thor quite often in comparison to the other 4 characters that I've mentioned.
Yeah,
He's like the Eye of Saruman and Varys from Game of Thrones
Combined.
mixed.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
yeah.
about Asgard, not any specific ruler. Hey, that's a good way. But he got his job, quote unquote, because he saw a group of giants from like days away from Asgard and had time to warn Odin, like, they're coming, the giants are coming. And then they're like, hey, you're really good at seeing stuff, Heimdall. Maybe that should be your job. And that's how he got it.
You're
So
like
just stay there and don't move.
You're like the Paul Revere of Asgard. He's like, who's that? It's like later. It's gonna have later.
And unfortunately, he doesn't have a song about him, though.
Yeah.
No, yeah, exactly. But basically, any time in the past that Odin was on the opposite side of Thor, Heimdall was on basically fighting for Odin's side, trying to maintain order for Asgard. Fun tidbit. I think I talked about this when I talked about Amora in previous episode, but him and Amora kind of had a thing.
That's so weird.
Yeah, but they were kind of infatuated with each other. Like, she really liked him and he really liked her back, but she broke up with him when she was just like, I think you love Asgard more than me.
Oh, how dare you take your job seriously,
It's
Heimdall?
true. I think the way he was like, he was more devoted to Asgard than in love with her. So she was just like, this isn't going to work out because you just,
That would be a plus on my box
You're too
for somebody I was
patriotic.
infatuated with.
but yeah, while Odin's sleep happens, Heimdall's cast into the dream dimension is another crazy thing that happens. Cause comics, and he's unable to do anything but follow basic orders. So he kind of loses all autonomy, and kind of, now that I think about it, it's kind of like a mockery of himself because he's a very loyal, steadfast person that does listen to orders, and now it's like that's all he can do.
Yeah. He's cool with it. I mean, I think what's really cool about him, like, because you mentioned the senses and everything like that. I love how, in sort of like almost Shakespearean fashion, they want to describe that in the most hyperbolic way, because he's said to be able to see grass growing from a world away and hear the beating of a butterfly's wings, like that Ashton Kutcher movie or whatever.
I don't think that's what that was.
No, that's probably true. And then and what's crazy is recently, like, he was always just on the bridge, just being Heimdall, like, don't come in here, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
But now because they've changed the nature of the Bifrost, with his sword Hofund, he like controls the teleportation.
Yeah.
He's like the main ferryman for all of Asgard.
Super cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, put in the dream dimension, only follow orders. Amora saves him. Then they break up. So that's the order of events. Rebirth happens after Ragnarok. Thor finds him in New Orleans and recruits him. And he's actually the first one that he finds, too, is Heimdall.
That makes sense.
I mean, one of the most useful allies to have for sure. And then, like Jared said, now he's kind of going back to being a guardian, but he kind of has a little bit more control. He's not just a sentinel
he
stationed at the Bifrost.
They made the art so cool now too, because his eyes are all starry.
Yeah.
Like, kind of try to illustrate like how he can see everything. It's so cool.
Everything.
I love him.
Yeah.
But yes, that's Heimdall.
And then the last ally we should talk about. I guess I have two. One's going to be very short. Balder. So Balder, I like to mention.
Colorado.
Boulder, Colorado, exactly.
No!
Or it's probably Baldier or something like that.
Everyone loves Balder.
Yeah. Well, he's great. And I regard him as the most important Thor character that's never made it into the movies or really other outside medium.
Yeah.
So he's in Norse mythology, he's the god of light. In comic books, he ends up having that power a lot of times. It's like he can just be like startled bright or whatever. It's not great. Anyway, no. But he's also one of the best like warriors and one of the most like noble characters. That's kind of he has a very bright personality. He's very beloved, and everything like that. He's also, and this it's weird because this kind of gets rediscovered. They forget it, but he's also Odin's third son. So he's and the only one that's just Odin and Frigga. It's just Balder. And he ends up being important because not only is he like a person that Thor can turn to or something like that, he's also important because he ends up being, and I mentioned this before, if he dies, for Ragnarok. And he's kind of had that every once in a while. In Asgard, the idea that he's invincible to everything but mistletoe. Like in the so when they in the mythology, when they find out that Balder is the catalyst to the end of the world, his mother Frigg basically blesses him to be invincible to everything. And it's one of those like anthropomorphic thing where she gets everything to agree to not hurt him. Like, hey, wildebeest, don't hurt him. They're like, cool, okay. Monkey grass, don't do it. And mistletoe's the only thing that doesn't agree.
Oh my god!
It involves Loki, obviously,
the most jolly of all plants.
Yeah,
and it's like, meh.
So he's supposed to be invincible, but that kind of only gets translated every once in a while. Most of the time, he's just like a sort of regular to slightly elite.
I like that
Asgardian.
dude.
Yep. And he's been the king of Asgard several times when Thor didn't want to do it or couldn't do it. And he's also been the king of Hell, which is fun.
Whoa.
Yeah, he gets around in his kingliness. But yeah, so that's Balder. And then the last one I should mention, we talked about him a little bit, is Better Ray Bill.
Horseface.
We have to talk about him just briefly because he's like the biggest cult Thor supporting character there is.
He made a cameo in Thor Ragnarok.
He did. I mean, well, his face did.
Yeah,
at least.
on that big building.
Yeah. But yeah, so the idea is that, as I mentioned before, Better Ray Bill was a Corbinite, which is is a Corbinite, which is an alien, and then his people were destroyed by Surtur. Their world was destroyed because he was trying to create the sword Twilight or whatever, and it killed all of Better Ray Bill's people, and so the last of them leave on this big ship called Scuttlebutt. Totally cool.
Oh my god.
And they transform him into this cyborg monstrosity that he doesn't want to be, but out of loyalty to protect them. And it makes him incredibly like Hulk level strong, that kind of stuff. Again, like I said before, he fights Thor, gets the hammer, is transformed. Odin's like, well, you can't keep that hammer because that's my son. He's the real Thor, but I'm going to give you your own hammer. It's going to be called Stormbreaker. Later on, the movie's going to rip it off.
I love how he could just make more Mjolnirs.
Odin's kind of a
so that's
badass.
not so special, right?
Yeah. Well, he has to get the dwarves to kind of like call in a favor or whatever. And yeah, so that's basically Better Ray Bill's deal. And I think the only problem with him is that he ends up being kind of like just Thor with a horse face. Like they haven't distinguished the character that much.
I feel like he's more level-headed for sure.
That's
A lot of the
hilarious.
time.
Seems like it, yeah, and or at least a little bit more like laid back. You know what I mean? But the way he's functioned in the comics is, he's got all of Thor's powers essentially, with a few exceptions, like he doesn't have the God Force kind of thing. But he looks very similar. So if there's a space story and they want to have Thor in it instead of Thor because he's busy doing Earth or Asgardian shit. Oftentimes they'll be like, well, Better Ray Bill's there. So he's kind of Marvel's resident space god, Space Thor.
All right. Time for my favorite part of doing deep dives.
Oh my God.
Is Noah's Animal Corner.
How is there always animals?
Oh, just wait. So...
Yeah, this is Norse mythology. There's going to be some animals.
I love this so much. So there's Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder. They're mythical goats of Thor that pull his chariot.
He's
Great.
Apollo now.
Yeah,
No, wait,
that's
Helios. He's the one that has a
The
chariot.
funny
Yeah,
thing
true.
with his goats is they can be reborn if eaten, but they can't be reborn if any of their bones are broken in the process of eating them. So what he would do is if he kills them and like eats their flesh, but leaves their bones fine, he'll wake up in the morning and they'll be reborn.
You can tell that's right out of the Norse mythology. That's definitely something that would have been written then, and it happens to be. What's the craziest thing is they're still friends with him afterwards.
I need Odin to mind wipe me right now.
Yeah.
That's
So-
horrifying.
And other shitty news with these two
No.
lovely goats. Mangog ripped Tooth Gnasher's head off. Rest in peace.
Did he
Tooth
break a
Gnasher.
bone?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I would imagine. Oh, that's a good point because maybe it was
Yeah,
just
just-
ligaments and stuff.
Vertebrae.
That's a good point. Maybe we'll see Tooth Gnasher back.
Yeah, so that's essentially their. So another cool thing about them is that in mythology, their hooves are what thunder are. So as they're like galloping through the clouds,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's pretty cool. And then on to my favorite one.
Wait, you forgot they fly like at the speed of light. I thought as a Flash fan you would be. I thought that's why you
No.
wanted to do that.
Goats are
didn't-
as fast as the Flash.
No, I didn't
Well,
want to say
almost.
that because it says many times the speed of light, which
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. So anyway.
Oh, but goats that come back from the dead does.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, moving on. Flash is faster. So on to my favorite one, Thori. So just to give you a little background on who Thori is. So Thori was one of the 7 hell pups born of Garm and sired by Hellwolf after the pair were left together and Loki turned his back. So they got
My
busy,
God.
busy while Loki wasn't paying attention. His siblings inherited their mother's delightful and loyal nature, and Thori inherited his father's vicious and feral nature. Garm didn't want to raise them, so she gave them to Kid Loki. So this is the point in Loki's history when he was a kid. And she gave him all these pups because she's like, I don't want to raise these fuckers. So here you go, Thor, or Loki. The All-Mother ordered Kid Loki to find them homes. 6 of them, and this is great, 6 of them went to different people. Mephisto got one, Gaia got one, Warlock got one, the New Mutants, Heimdall, Tyr, and one was given to a Midgardian animal shelter.
Oh God.
Yeah.
A hellhound was just
Here you
given.
go.
Yeah, and in the comic, it's a joke. He more like, here you go, here's this dog, adopt it, whatever. And anyway, Thori himself has had a few owners, and currently is with Thor after Thor kind of rescued him because the Collector
From
had
the Collector,
him.
yeah.
Yeah. But the cool thing about Thori is he has powers. He has pyrokinesis, interdimensional tracking, speech. He can talk.
That's terrifying.
And boy, does he.
Yeah. So Jared said he is, if I was a animal in the Marvel universe, I would be him. And I think this is why. So Thori appears to be one of the only of his litter to be able to speak. His speech pattern is usually threatening and grim.
You're Hogan and Thor.
Thori.
There's a great scene in the recent comics where he's like eating all these fire demons and he's doing it in Oprah format. He's like,
Yeah.
you get a murder, you get a
Yeah.
murder, you get a murder. He's great.
And he can fly interdimensionally or interstellarly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's Thori. I love him. He's great.
Oh my
He,
God.
he's a relatively new incarnation and he's he's just so cool.
Taken off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And then on to the most ridiculous thing I've ever found from Thor's history.
It's so good.
Throg, which is a frog that is Thor.
What?
So not when Thor was turned into a frog
Bye, Loki.
by Loki. This guy is Simon Walterson, which is the artist that drew Throg. That's this guy's name.
Well, it's Walt Simonson, so they did a kind of
Oh my
like mash
God.
up kind of thing.
Yeah. So He was, so to give you a backstory on Simon Walterson, he's a football player. He was injured, couldn't play anymore. He met his wife, then his wife died. He tried to find answers by going to mystics and fortune tellers. He found one, and she pretty much said that your wife was pregnant when she died. That broke him even more, because why not just tear down a man even more when he's already
awful.
down?
Yeah.
And
This is like female character treatment.
yeah. And she was like, okay, pay me now, because I just, did my spiritual stuff. He didn't have any money. So what does she do? Turn him into a frog. And as he's hopping around, he makes his way to Central Park, and he gets in the middle of a war between frogs and rats.
What? Is this like a separate run, or was this in the continuity?
He has his own comics. And the frogs, after defeating the rats, and Thor, as Frog Thor, came and helped them defeat the rats, Thor hops off, and he's like, oh, these rats that survived are following this guy. Let me go help him. As he goes to try to warn him, he sees that this frog turns into human Thor, or Asgardian Thor. By the way, this Simon Walterson, that was his Throg, was given the name
Puddle Gulp.
Oh, Puddle Gulp, right?
Kayla's face right now is
I'm
making
not
it.
kidding. This is all true. And the cutest thing about this is that he gets his own Mjolnir. It's a chip. A piece fell off from the regular Mjolnir.
He's so cute.
He gets his own hammer.
Oh my god.
So, but it gets better. So Throg is recruited by Lockjaw to join the Pet Avengers.
No. Stop.
Yeah, so Lockjaw found one of the Infinity Stones, and what does he do? But gets all of the pets that have some type of superpower together, and they create the Pet Avengers, which had about 6 issues. So there is a trade called Lockjaw and the Pet Avengers. And that team consisted of Lockheed, Lockjaw, Miss Lion, which is actually a male dog. It's Aunt May's dog. Niels, Redwing, Throg, and Zaboo.
Oh my god.
So find that one, guys.
By the way, I love that his hammer has a name.
Yeah.
It's Frog Yolnir.
Yeah.
Oh!
And that's it for Noah's Animal Corner. Let's deep dive of Thor.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're talking about Loki now.
Jeez.
I've been
You
waiting
actually
for
scared
this.
me.
Okay, well, I feel like Jared was waiting for this entire episode. You were waiting to talk about Lady Thor or Jane Thor.
Yeah.
And I was waiting to talk about Loki because I always want to talk about Loki.
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay, so up top, we're going to refer back to episode 3. I think we did a villains episode and we talked about Loki a whole bunch because we all know a lot about him and we all love him.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about movie and comic book version.
Yeah, exactly. So this time we'll do less deep divey stuff and more just his relationship with Thor because that's the context we're doing all of these in.
Yep.
But he was around since the beginning. 1962 was when Thor and Loki were both created. So he's been a pain in his ass since the very beginning. But yeah, I mean, he's sometimes a villain, sometimes an anti-hero.
Sometimes both in the same story.
Yeah. He kind of swans in and out. He's almost always there, but what is he doing this time? Whose side is he on?
Yeah, and you might not even know if it's actually him or not.
Yeah, exactly, because he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve.
Yes, and he is part frost giant, and his father, like we talked about, Lao Fei, was being brought back by Malekith.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a big integral part to his story currently.
I think my favorite thing about Loki is based on the nature of his character because he's this mischievous character that can kind of just chaotic neutral. Would we say that?
Yeah.
But he has a consistent character sort of persona. You can have him be all these different kinds of characters in a story and it still makes sense and doesn't feel like he's departed. So he can be this sort of evil, angry at Thor, powerful wizard character.
Yeah.
He can be like one of his best friends that's still hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he can be a third party crazy, like getting in the way, everybody's way, and it all works. I think that's what's great about Loki.
Yeah, and I mean, his character kind of trajectory has always been, because it's still muddied, very muddied. But he's always kind of had a reluctant fondness for Thor. And I would say one of the first times I actually thought about the psychology of the character was when I was reading Blood Brothers, Thor and Loki, Blood Brothers, and it's basically
So
like,
good.
yeah. But he talks about how he stopped, he kind of lost it when he perceived Thor stopping loving him, you know,
Which is
but
kind of sweet.
yeah, no, exactly. He was just like, you're the only person to ever show me kindness, and then you stopped, and that's kind of when Loki kind of, yeah. But a new wave of Loki-ness kind of happened with Tom Hiddleston's portrayal, obviously, in Thor.
So charming, so menacing, so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, very roguish.
It's like mercutial moods, but also he's still, like you had said, very charming, very interesting. He just is a very multidimensional character.
And the biggest difference between movie and comic Loki is that in the comics, he's much more mystical and sorcery-like. He even became the Sorcerer Supreme, taking that from Doctor Strange. But he does a lot more in the comics than just having, little daggers and like just kind of shape-shifting into other things.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely downplay the magic stuff. He's more like a rogue that he's...
Yeah. His only ability is guise.
Oh, I forgot. We also talked about him in our Marvel Magic episode.
Yes.
We talked about up top. And I always like to mention this because if you don't read a lot of comics, you might be like, what does this character do? And because Loki can do so much, like, what does he usually do? So Loki sort of specializes in illusion and deception.
Yeah.
A lot of elemental powers, so a lot of like fire and ice sort of stuff like that. That was sort of more back in the day when he was usually just wizarding it up.
Yeah.
And then lately, like you mentioned with the Tom Hiddleston stuff, there's a knife motif.
Yep.
Yeah. Or he uses his horns. His little helmet
very
horn
cool.
thing. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that part so
Oh my
much.
gosh, his helmet is so ridiculous.
When he did that, didn't it feel like, why don't they always have him stab people with these horns?
Agreed. Yeah, I think the best part about his character is his waning between good and bad.
Well, just
or
look
right
where
in
we
the
put
middle.
him in the deep dive. After supporting characters and love interests, but before the villains, because we don't know. And
That's
he
right.
doesn't know.
Yeah, that's the best place for him, I think. And I think that's where he shines the best, and that's where he should stay. Don't make him one or the other.
Yeah, I have here my original notes from episode 3. So like months ago. It says, best when being a sarcastic little shit on Thor's side.
Yeah.
I mean, and that goes back to why I advocate for Thor the Dark World so much. Is because I feel like their relationship, every time I bring that up, Kayla's face.
No,
But
I mean, the family stuff is really good in that
exactly.
movie.
That's why I love that
The rest
movie.
is garbage.
Yes. And I think Loki and Thor's relationship was really fleshed out and you really got to understand it the most in Dark World. That's why I love it the most.
And he's so sad and ironic. It's a great character because he's, of all the Norse pantheon and maybe in all comics, he's one of the funniest characters, filled with mirth and silliness and that kind of detachment. Also, he's the most locked into the tragedy of his character arc. He cannot escape it. And in big Ragnarokian terms, he's the one who's going to
He
start
starts it.
Ragnarok.
Even if he doesn't want to.
Yeah. Because he's the one that tricks Balder's brother Hoder in the blind god of winter into firing an arrow of mistletoe into his brother's. He's like, oh, no, that's totally not your brother. Fire the arrow. And then,
Little shit.
yeah.
So, we went from the white, touched on the gray, going to the villains now. So we're going deep in with the black. So up top, starting with Mora and the Executioner, because they typically go hand in hand, because the Executioner is a minion of Amora. But
A match made in hell.
for real. They do have he is completely in love with her, but she has actually a begrudging fondness for her little minion. I went deep into them in our 19th episode, Mages and Marvel, so I'm just going to touch on them a little bit here because they are pretty, especially Amora is a big part. Both came in 1964, so she's been around for a very long time. She's basically a hella powerful enchantress.
Yep.
Because her villain name is the Enchantress. But she's Asgardian. She's been a love interest for Thor sometimes. Like I'd said in Thor's reign, they have a kid together. She's been a love interest for Heimdall, like I mentioned as well, which as I was doing that research, I was like, hey, this is kind of sexist. She's been a love interest for a lot of people just because she is a seductress as well. She specializes in charm magic, so I'm guessing they just cross the line sometimes into just going full on seductress.
In her defense, almost, even though she's a love interest, she's usually pulling the strings and kind of in charge.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Ironically, after she's one of Thor's love interests at one point, also one of the greatest adversaries. Her and the Executioner, who is half storm giant, which is fun because that's why he is a little bit more powerful than the average Asgardian male.
Yeah.
They join the Masters of Evil, so they join a lot of evil organizations for the Avengers villains as well. So, I mean, they just, yeah.
Thor has a whole host of villain. He has a really good rogues gallery. I think it's almost underestimated about this character. And I want to run through a few of them just really quickly, just because, like, just to give you a sense of like what he's out there fighting most of the time. Have you guys heard of Ulik?
Nope.
No.
Really?
Sounds like a
too bad.
Pokemon.
Ulik's one of my favorites. Right. Ulik is one of the rock trolls. So, but we mentioned all these different like worlds, and they all have different denizens. Well, the rock trolls are interesting because they're like this displaced group of people, like the Palestinians or something like that. In that, they have no home of their own, and the rock trolls live underground and all over, mostly Asgard, but Jotunheim and everywhere else. And Ulik is like not necessarily usually the king, but like their biggest champion. He's one of the few characters out there as strong as the mighty Thor, and man, does he hate Thor. Definitely a second banana character, but he's this big orange troll dude, and he has these Uru brass knuckles. So that's kind of, and I like him because he's a big hulking character, but he's also kind of smart too, kind of savvy or whatever. Okay, so that's Ulik.
He's like the proper way to do Professor Hulk.
Yeah, in a sense. Yeah, he's angry and hairy. Okay, Thor has his own Wolverine, but without claws. Anyway, okay. And then there's Curse, which I think we saw in the second movie, right? So there's another one of Thor's big hulking villains who like can, I don't know, crush mountains with a thing. But that's pretty common. And I think you sort of see that in a lot of Thor comics, which is really big dudes that hate Thor and are kind of just second bananas. But Curse is totally scary, and
Why
that's
do you keep saying bananas?
I'm so hungry. Anyway.
I was like, wait, what? Bananas?
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I've never heard that expression.
But in terms of antagonists, the other thing about Thor comics is he often is fighting against these kind of Galactus level primordial forces that you don't think so much in terms of like, oh, it's an evil villain, so much as like, oh, that thing is destroying the universe.
It's a force of chaos.
Yeah.
And,
So Surtur, we saw him, that giant fire demon who's got the Twilight sword, who
destroys Asgard.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ymir, who is a giant frost giant that basically is who Odin killed to create the cosmos, but somehow is not dead. I don't know how that works. And he comes back every once in a while. And then there's Jormungand. So a lot of this is just an excuse for me to say cool Norse names.
Yeah, I already forgot the last three that you said.
you mentioned this one. Jormungand is the giant Midgard serpent that is known to not like wrap around Midgard. He's that big. You said Thor lifted him, one of his big strength
He's
feats.
twirled him around and threw him somewhere.
into the sun, because that's where things go.
That's where you
Probably.
put the evil stuff. But the bad part about him and why he's really scary is in Norse mythology and in the Marvel comics, he is the thing in Ragnarok that Thor kills, but that kills Thor. So Thor kills him, and then in 7 steps he succumbs to the serpent's so Thor's almost got a kind of like destiny phobia of him, but it's really really cool.
That's the thing in mythology too, that Loki's wife holds the bowl above his face, because I think the venom from the snake is dripping onto his face.
That's Nidhogg, I think.
Another giant snake.
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh, they've got lots of them. Yeah,
There's a lot of snakes wrapped around
That's
our
horrifying.
world.
I'm really glad Thor's universe isn't real.
that's Loki's punishment. You know what's the most disgusting part of that is that he's being bound by the entrails of his son to a rock. Yeah, it's really really
It's
awful.
really gross.
Yeah.
And then the last one of these major, big, scary thing we'll mention, we already talked about, it's Mangog, who is a giant demon Lego cat. It's hard to say what he is.
He
We
looks
don't
like
really know.
Kayla said he looks like a Dragon Ball Z character.
He really does.
Really does. He looks like something that like Frieza and Cell like mixed.
Yeah. And just what's cool about him, you should look up his images and everything like that. What's cool about him is
His name?
Mangog, and his history, which is that he came from there was an evil planet or world of billions of people. And Odin was like, these guys seem way too evil. Let me go ahead and commit genocide. So Odin kills
he do
all.
sometimes.
Yeah, that's what you got, angry Odin. But all of those billion dead souls bound together into this one being of hate Mangog, who wants nothing more than to kill Odin, Thor, and probably kittens. He probably wants to kill other
That
stuff.
evil.
He's super evil and
I mean, he's he's pretty much like Doomsday,
yes,
but in the Marvel universe,
Yeah.
because he's just destructive and he doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so weird and goofy looking, but in his recent depiction, they actually
Scary.
made me scared of this thing. So check it out. But and then the last villain that I'll talk about is one I think we all at this point love, which is really cool, which is Hela. Or Hell.
Yes.
We add the A for feminization or whatever, but
Yep.
she was originally Hell or
Yep.
whatever. And she is the Norse Norsa, the Norse
Just
goddess.
keep adding A's to everything.
Exactly, of death.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And Kate Blanchett played her fantastically.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Now,
What a charming seductress
Absolutely.
that character was.
now there's some subtle distinctions. One is that she's not Thor's sister in the mythology or the comics. She's his niece. She's the daughter of Loki. So Loki and this giantess Angerboda had
She sounds ugly.
three children. Fenris Wolf, Jormungand the Midgard serpent, and the goddess of death Hela. So their kids sucked.
So, no, whatever. I'm not even going to ask about the genealogy of that and
Yeah,
how it
it's-
makes a wolf a serpent and a lady of death.
Loki
Yeah.
also has that hooved horse
Yeah.
child
Yeah.
that Odin rides in the movies. I'm like, that's weird.
It's 8 legs and it's Sleipnir. But anyway, because that's how Vikings were like, what if it had more legs? It's twice as many legs. That's fast.
It moves just twice as fast.
Yeah.
More legs, twice as fast.
That's very true. Anyway, so Hela in the comics is the goddess of death, and she doesn't have that cool sword power, like the ability to create weapons
She
and stuff
should.
like that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Instead, if she touches you, you die.
Yikes.
So that's kind of cool.
She's like
Yeah.
Rogue to an extreme.
Absolutely. She controls the land of the dead. And she's got this cool thing where half of her face, her true face, is death and carotid and corpsey, and the other half is a beautiful lady. Because that's death.
Yeah.
And
She's like my good side.
yeah. And she's a fantastic villain. I mean, I think one of the great thing about Thor villains is they all have kind of different motivations and feel it's like Batman in that like they all have distinct
I think
places
you can
they
get
occupy.
philosophical when you fight death itself.
Yeah. And she often ends up being not exactly evil.
Yeah.
Just sort of like trying to expand her kingdom. And Thor gets in her way, but she's one of those in the middle there, like
A darker gray than Loki, but
yeah.
Well, she's surrounded by death. I can't blame her.
Yeah.
She has her place.
And she kills everybody she touches. That sucks.
yeah.
yeah.
That really does suck.
Yeah. And then she goes along with that like Hades kind of thing where there's like a long underworld deity tradition of being mad that's their job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I drew the short stick.
Yeah. But yeah, that's Hela. We all love her. She's great.
Yeah, well, we all love her.
But doesn't she look cool with the
She does
horns
look
and the oh
cool.
my god, yeah.
I mean, in the movie, yeah.
yeah.
All right. On to the final and my favorite villain.
Weird choice.
Yeah, I love him.
Weird
Malekith,
choice.
the accursed.
Why is that your favorite?
Because he's amazing. He's such a good villain.
Eh.
I don't agree with his stances.
I'm just saying there are more interesting ones out there, but go off.
I mean in Thor. My favorite villain in Thor. Let me specify that. Not all time. So just to give a very brief on what he is and what he does, he has super strength, super speed, durability, blah, 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 blah. He shapeshifts, turns into a mist-like substance to travel, sorcery, spellcasting.
That's cheating.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he is a mystic. And
He's a dark elf mystic, the worst.
and he is weak to iron, which all elves are. So that's his fucking weakness.
It's a
Yeah.
pretty big weakness,
It's
honestly.
better than mistletoe, I'm just going to say.
Hey, but I feel like weapons and iron go more hand in hand. You have to search actively for mistletoe. If he tries to come
Yeah.
to Midgard, it's like a whole bunch of iron.
Yeah, but one can die from tea and one can die from like a sword.
That's true.
So
Poisoning.
yeah.
And that's the history of fairies. They're usually like have a
Iron.
problem with iron.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a dark elf from Svartalheim.
Nice.
Just to give
What was it again? You
No,
want to try that one? again?
fine.
Svartalheim.
Good job.
what did I say it wrong?
You said Gurgleheim. No, go ahead.
So during the 43rd Troll War, I guess there's 43 at this
Whoa.
point, his mother sold him to the Undertaker elves of the southern swamps for food for their war dogs. So poor little Malekith. Later, he fed his mother to the war dogs and took the mantle of Lord of the Wild Hunt.
Jesus Christ.
So payback's a bitch. I don't know. He kicked off the Surtur saga when Malekith struck an alliance with Loki on behalf of the demon Surtur. He took control of a number of Earth humans during giving them special food of the Fae provided by Hela. So Hela played a part in this. Malekith was ultimately defeated by Thor, but not before he destroyed the Casket of Ancient Winters, releasing a magical frigid force all over the Earth. Many villains, such as Graviton, took advantage of this, and Surtur fought the Avengers. So that's what kicked off this big Surtur saga with the Avengers. Throughout Jason's Aaron run, Malekith has been slowly and sneakily murdering and making deals on the 9 realms and taking control of them slowly. Which brings us to the big event that's currently happening, War of Realms. And also, I wanted to point out, he brought Lao Fei back with the blood of 1,000 light elves. So that just
she just had lying around, really.
That
just paints a picture on how many elves and people he's killed.
He's like Thor's Joker in a certain way, by the way. Not that he's necessarily the highest villain or anything like that, but we talked about all the villains. Malekith might be the only straight up evil one.
Yeah, he's like chaotic evil to the max. I love it. Also, his aesthetic is really cool because half of him is blue and the other half is black. It's just, it looks striking.
Because he's accursed.
Yeah, he's real cool.
Yeah.
All right, and to end this gigantic Mighty Thor episode, it's a big, bulky sized episode. End it with comic book recommendations.
This episode's as big as Frost Giant, guys. Yeah.
I hope you're happy with it, Jared.
I am.
So I will, of course, one of my favorite parts of Thor is the whole Jane Foster Mighty Thor storyline.
You don't say.
Shut up, Kate. So the Mighty Thor, you can get it in volumes now, which is super easy and super convenient. It's called Thunder in Her Veins, and it's by Jason Aaron. The artist is Russell Dodderman. And I'm just going to say the tagline for it because I think it's awesome. Like, you read the back of the book and this is the first thing that says, it's Dr. Jane Foster's the goddess of thunder, and it's killing her. That's all you need to know.
That's the whole story in a sentence. Yeah, good.
It's super good. And Kayla?
Yeah. Well, there are a ton of definitive Thor volumes you could pick up to be a good starting place, but I'm just gonna go with the movie instead. So watch the first Thor movie because I know people really have mixed feelings about it, but I feel like it sets up his relationships really well from the get-go with all of the characters that we mentioned, and then it also just kind of in itself encapsulates his journey to find worthiness, which I thought was nice.
Yeah, and I like that one because he doesn't have a hammer for a good chunk of it. So it's really interesting.
I mean, I don't know if people like the movie or not. I think it's halfway or whatever.
Yeah.
But I will say, since I was 9, I've been a fan of this character. And when I was watching that movie, the whole time I was like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah, I really like
2.5 hours.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do, if you're really interested in starting to read Thor comics and stuff, go back to our first episode, because Thor was the character I spotlighted as my favorite character, and I actually sort of gave some recommendations that are some really meat and potatoes: Walt Simonson, Jason Aaron, Avon Oming stuff that you really should check out. But for this time, I want to spotlight what I take to be an incredible gem in Thor comics. It's called Thor the Mighty Adventure. It came out in 2010, and it was very much trying to give a kind of retelling of a story about if Thor came to Earth for the first time now, meets Jane. And it's a very funny comic. It exploits everything that's good about the first sort of movie. And Thor is still pretty arrogant, definitely a good guy, but he cannot believe that people just don't inherently see how awesome he is and just listen to everything he says and everything like that. But he's definitely in love with Jane and some great beating the shit out of people and monsters and stuff.
Has everything.
So since he met in 2010, in current times, was it on Tinder or something?
Oh my God.
No, he just got that would be really good. I think he falls into a museum or something like that.
Oh,
yeah, no, I know. But it really is the good thing about it, it's funny and lighthearted in a way that the comics hadn't been, and the movie definitely is. So,
and that's Thor, guys. That's deep dive of Thor.
That's right.
We made it. Jeez. All right, thanks, guys.